Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in Hythe, otherwise known as the Haven, southeast England, just near the English Channel. Working our way through Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada's masterful summary study of the 10th canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is the summum bonum of the Bhagavatam, which is the summum bonum of all the Vedas. So we're literally going to hear the crème de la crème de la crème. And we have an honored guest, Radharaman, our landlord? No. Tenants? Whatever we are with him. And he's kindly come to hear. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mihima Stotram from Sri Krishna Lila Stava. Text 412 through 416. 5 verses. Essential verses glorifying the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and particularly Krishna's Lila in Vrindavan by Srila Sanatana Goswami. It goes like this. Sarva Shastra Dipiyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho Kalidvandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Savasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madgudo Mad Mahadana Manistadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadhu sadhutadayin adini chochatakara anamunchagadachin mam premna rit kantayokspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we've come to part 6 of our reading of the 87th chapter of the 10th canto, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Prayers by the Personified Vedas. Could you maybe shut them? It may be argued that because the living entities are born of the material nature, they are all equal and independent. In the Vedic literature, however, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates the material nature with the living entities, and then they come out. Therefore, the appearance of the individual living entities is not factually due to material nature alone. Just as a child produced by a woman is not her independent production, a woman is first impregnated by a man, and then a child is produced. As such, the child produced by the woman is part and parcel of the man. Similarly, the living entities are apparently produced by the material nature, but not independently. It is due to the impregnation of the material nature by the Supreme Father that the living entities are present. Therefore, the argument that the individual living entities are not parts and parcels of the Supreme cannot stand. For example, the different parts of the body cannot be taken as equal to the whole. Rather, the whole body is the controller of the different limbs. Similarly, the parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole are always dependent and are always controlled by the source of the parts and parcels. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna. Mamai Bhangsha. No sane man, therefore, will accept the theory that the supersoul and the individual soul are of the same category. They are equal in quality, but quantitatively, the supersoul is always the supreme, and the individual soul is always subordinate to the supersoul. That is the conclusion of the Vedas. The significant word used in this connection is Yanmaya or Chinmaya. In Sanskrit grammar, the word mayat is used in the sense of transformation and also in the sense of abundance. The Mayavadi philosophers interpret that the word Yanmaya or Chinmaya indicates that the living entity is always equal to the Supreme. But one has to consider whether this affix, mayat, is used for abundance or for transformation. The living entity never possesses anything exactly in the same proportion as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, this mayat affix cannot be used to mean that the individual living entity is quantitatively equal with the Lord. The individual living entity never has complete knowledge. Otherwise, how could he have come under the control of Maya or the material energy? The word abundant can be accepted, therefore, only in proportion to the magnitude of the living entity. The spiritual oneness of the Supreme Lord and the living entities is never to be accepted as homogeneity. Each and every living entity is individual. If homogeneous oneness is accepted, then by the liberation of one individual soul, all other individual souls would have been liberated immediately. But the fact is that every individual soul is differently enjoying and suffering in the material world. As mentioned above, the word mayat is also used in the sense of transformation. Sometimes it is also used to mean byproduct. The impersonalist theory is that Brahman himself has accepted different types of bodies and that this is his Śrīla, or pastime. There are, however, many hundreds and thousands of species of life in different standards of living conditions, such as human beings, demigods, animals, birds, and beasts. And if all of them were plenary expansions of the Supreme Absolute Truth, then there would be no question of liberation, because Brahman would already be liberated. Another interpretation put forward by the Mayavadis is that in every millennium, different types of bodies are manifest, and that when the millennium is closed, all the different bodies, or expansions of Brahman, automatically become one, ending all different manifestations. Then in the next millennium, according to this theory, Brahman again expands in different bodily forms. If we accept this theory, then Brahman becomes subject to change. But this cannot be accepted. From the Vedanta Sutra, we understand that Brahman is by nature joyful. He cannot, therefore, change himself into a body which is subject to so many painful conditions. Actually, the living entities are infinitesimal parts and parcels of Brahman, and as such, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy. As explained before, the particles of Brahman are like sparks blissfully dancing within a fire, but there is a chance of their falling from the fire to smoke, although smoke is another condition of fire. This material world is just like smoke, and the spiritual world is like a blazing fire. The innumerable living entities are prone to fall down to the material world from the spiritual world when influenced by the illusory energy. And it is also possible for the living entity to be liberated again when the cultivation of real knowledge, by the cultivation of real knowledge, he becomes completely freed from the contamination of the material world. The theory of the Asuras is that the living entities are born of material nature, or Prakriti, in touch with the Purusha. This theory also cannot be accepted because both the material nature and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are eternally existing. Neither the material nature nor the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be born. The Supreme Lord is known as Aja, or unborn. Similarly, the material nature is called Aja. Aja. Both these terms, Aja and Aja, mean unborn. Because both the material nature and the Supreme Lord are unborn, it is not possible that they can beget the living entities. But it is accepted in the Vedic literature that as water is in contact with air, sometimes presents innumerable bubbles, so a combination of the material nature and the Supreme Person causes the appearance of the living entities within this material world. As bubbles in the water appear in different shapes, the living entities also appear in the material world in different shapes and conditions, influenced by the modes of material nature. Therefore, it is not improper to conclude that the living entities appearing within this material world in different shapes, such as human beings, demigods, animals, birds, and beasts, all get their respective bodies due to different desires. No one can say when such desires were awakened in them, and therefore it is said, Anadi karma, the cause of such material existence, is untraceable. No one knows when material life began, but it is a fact that it does have a point of beginning, because originally every living entity is a spiritual spark. As a spark's falling onto the ground from a fire has a beginning, so a living entity's coming to this material world has a beginning, but no one can say when. Even though during the time of dissolution, all the conditioned living entities remain merged within the spiritual existence of the Lord, as if in deep sleep, their original desires to lord it over the material nature do not subside. Again, when there is cosmic manifestation, they come out to fulfill the same desires, and therefore they appear in different species of life. The living entities merged into the Supreme at the time of dissolution are compared to honey. In the honeycomb, the tastes of different flowers are conserved. When one drinks honey, one cannot distinguish what sort of honey has been collected from what sort of flower. But the palatable taste of the honey presupposes that the honey is not homogeneous, but is a combination of different tastes. Another example is that although different rivers ultimately mix with the water of the sea, this does not mean that the individual identities of the rivers are thereby lost. Although the water of the Ganges and the water of the Yamuna mix with the water of the sea, the river Ganges and river Yamuna still continue to exist independently. The merging of different living entities into Brahman at the time of dissolution involves the dissolution of different types of bodies. But the living entities, along with their different tastes, remain individually submerged in Brahman until another manifestation of the material world. As a salty taste of seawater and the sweet taste of Ganges water are different, and this difference continuously exists, so the difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities continuously exists, even though at the time of dissolution they appear to merge. The conclusion is, therefore, that even when the living entities become free from all contamination of material conditions and merge into the spiritual kingdom, their individual tastes in relationship with the Supreme Lord continue to exist. The Personified Vedas continue. Dear Lord, it is therefore our conclusion that all conditioned living entities are attracted by your material energy, and that it is only due to their mistakenly identifying themselves as products of the material nature that they are transmigrating from one kind of body to another in forgetfulness of their eternal relationship with you. Because of ignorance, these living entities misidentify themselves in different species of life, and especially when elevated to the human form of life, they identify with a particular class of men, or a particular nation, or race, or so-called religion, forgetting their real identity as eternal servants of your Lordship. Due to this faulty conception of life, they are undergoing repeated birth and death. Out of the many millions of them, if one becomes intelligent enough by associating with pure devotees, he comes to the understanding of Krishna consciousness and comes out of the jurisdiction of the material conception. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is confirmed by Lord Chaitanya that the living entities are wandering within this universe in different species of life, but that if one of them becomes intelligent enough by the mercy of the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, then he begins his devotional life in Krishna consciousness. It is said, Harim bina na mritim taranti. Without the help of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot get out of the clutches of repeated birth and death. In other words, only the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, can relieve the conditioned souls from the cycle of repeated birth and death. The Personified Vedas continued. The influence of time, past, present, and future, and the material miseries such as excessive heat, excessive cold, birth, death, old age, and disease, are all simply the movements of your eyebrows. Everything is working under your direction. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that all material activity is going on under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The Vedas continued. All the conditions of material existence are opposing elements for persons who are not surrendered unto you. But for those who are surrendered souls and are in full Krishna consciousness, these things cannot be a source of fear. when Lord Nrsimhadev appeared, Prahlad Maharaj was never afraid of him, whereas his atheist father was immediately faced with death personified and was killed. Therefore, although Lord Nrsimhadev appears as death for an atheist like Hiranyakashipu, he is always kind and is the reservoir of all pleasure for the devotees like Prahlad. A pure devotee is not, therefore, afraid of birth, death, old age, and disease. Sripad Sridhar Swami has composed a nice verse in this regard, the meaning of which is as follows. My dear Lord, I am a living entity, perpetually disturbed by the conditions of material existence. I have been cracked to pieces by the smashing wheel of material existence. And because of my various sinful activities while existing in this material world, I am burning in the blazing fire of material reactions. Somehow or other, my dear Lord, I have come to take shelter under your lotus feet. Please accept me and give me protection. Srila Narottam Das Thakur also prays like this. My dear Lord, O son of Nanda Maharaj, associated with the daughter of Rishabhanu, I have come to take shelter under your lotus feet after suffering greatly in the material condition of life. And I pray that you please be merciful upon me. Please do not kick me away, for I have no shelter other than you. The conclusion is that any process of self-realization or God realization other than bhakti yoga or devotional service is extremely difficult. Taking shelter of devotional service to the Lord in full Krishna consciousness is therefore the only way to become free from the contamination of material conditioned life, especially in this age. Those who are not in Krishna consciousness are simply wasting their time, and they have no tangible proof of spiritual life. It is said by Lord Ramachandra, I always give confidence and security to anyone who surrenders unto me and decides definitely that he is my eternal servant. For that is my natural inclination. Can I repeat that? Permission granted? Oh, good. Unanimous. It is said by Lord Ramachandra, I always give confidence and security to anyone who surrenders unto me and decides definitely that he is my eternal servant, for that is my natural inclination. Similarly, Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the influence of material nature is insurmountable, but anyone who surrenders unto me can verily overcome the influence of material nature. The devotees are not at all interested in arguing with the non-devotees to nullify their theories. Rather than wasting time, they always engage themselves in the transcendental, loving service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continued, Dear Lord, although great mystic yogis may have full control over the elephant of the mind and the hurricane of the senses, unless they take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, they fall victim to the material influence and are never successful in their attempts at self-realization. Such unguided persons are compared to merchants going to sea on a ship without a captain. By one's personal attempts, therefore, one cannot get free from the clutches of material nature. One has to accept a bona fide spiritual master and work according to his direction. Then it is possible to cross over the nations of material conditions. Sripad Sridhar Swami has composed a nice verse in this connection in which he says, O all-merciful spiritual master, representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when my mind will be completely surrendered unto your lotus feet, at that time, only by your mercy, I shall be able to get relief from all obstacles to spiritual life, and I shall be situated in blissful life. Actually, ecstatic samadhi, or absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can be achieved by constant engagement in His service. And this constant engagement in devotional service can be performed only when one works under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. The Vedas therefore instruct that in order to know the science of devotional service, one has to submit himself unto the bona fide spiritual master. The bona fide spiritual master is he who knows the science of devotional service in disciplic succession. The disciplic succession is called Shrotriya. The prime symptom of one who has become a spiritual master in disciplic succession is that he is 100% fixed in bhakti yoga. Sometimes people neglect to accept a spiritual master, and instead they endeavor for self-realization by mystic yoga practice. But there are many instances of failure, even by the great yogis, like Vishwamrita. Arjuna said in the Bhagavad Gita that controlling the mind is as impractical as stopping the blowing of a hurricane. Sometimes the mind is compared to a maddened elephant. Without following the directions of a spiritual master, one cannot control the mind and the senses. In other words, if one practices yoga mysticism and does not accept a bona fide spiritual master, he will surely fail. He will simply waste his valuable time. The Vedic injunction is that no one can have full knowledge without being under the guidance of an Ācārya. Ācāryavan Purusho Veda. One who has accepted an Ācārya knows what is what. That's a classic Prabhupada. What is what? The absolute truth cannot be understood by arguments. Can I repeat that? The absolute truth cannot be understood by arguments. One who has attained the perfect Brahminical stage naturally becomes renounced. He does not strive for material gain, because by spiritual knowledge he has come to the conclusion that in this world there is no insufficiency. Everything is sufficiently provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A real Brahmana, therefore, does not endeavor for material perfection. Rather, he approaches a bona fide spiritual master to accept orders from him. A spiritual master's qualification is that he is Brahmanishta, which means that he has given up all other activities and has dedicated his life to working only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. When a bona fide student approaches a bona fide spiritual master, he submissively prays to the spiritual master, "My dear Lord, kindly accept me as your student and train me in such a way that I will be able to give up all other processes of self-realization and simply engage in Krishna consciousness, devotional service." The devotee engaged by the direction of the spiritual master in the transcendental loving service of the Lord contemplates as follows. "My dear Lord, you are the reservoir of pleasure. Since you are present, what is the use of the transient pleasure derived from society, friendship, and love? Persons unaware of the supreme reservoir of pleasure falsely engages in deriving pleasure from sense gratification. But this is transient and illusory. In this connection, Vidyapati a great Vaishnava devotee and poet says, "My dear Lord, undoubtedly there is some pleasure in the midst of society, friendship, and love, although it is materially conceived. But such pleasure cannot satisfy my heart. Although it is materially conceived, but such pleasure cannot satisfy my heart." I'll say that again. My dear Lord, undoubtedly there is some pleasure in the midst of society, friendship, and love, although it is materially conceived. But such pleasure cannot satisfy my heart, which is like a desert. In a desert there is need of an ocean of water, but if only a drop of water is poured on the desert, what is the value of such water? Similarly, our material hearts are full of multi-desires, which cannot be fulfilled by materialistic society, friendship, and love. When our hearts begin to derive pleasure from the supreme reservoir of pleasure, then we can be satisfied. That transcendental satisfaction is possible only in devotional service, in full Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continued, "Dear Lord, you are the Satchidananda Vigraha, the ever blissful form of personality, the ever blissful form of knowledge. And because the living entities are parts and parcels of your personality, their natural state of existence is to be fully conscious of you. In this material world, anyone who has developed such Krishna consciousness is no longer interested in the materialistic way of life. A Krishna conscious person becomes uninterested in family life, where there is some concession for sense enjoyment. In other words, he is no longer interested in sense gratification. The perfection of human life is based on knowledge and renunciation, but it is very difficult to attempt to reach the stage of knowledge and renunciation while in family life. Krishna conscious persons, therefore, take shelter of the association of devotees or sanctified places of pilgrimage. Such persons are aware of the relationship between the Supersoul and the individual living entities, and they are never in the bodily concept of life. Because they always carry you in full consciousness within their hearts, they are so purified that any place they go becomes a holy place of pilgrimage, and the water which washes their feet is able to deliver many sinful persons loitering within this material world. When Prahlad Maharaj was asked by his atheistic father to describe something very good which he had learned, he replied to his father, "For a materialistic person who was always full of anxieties due to being engaged in temporary and relative truths, the best course is to give up the blind well of family life and go to the forest to take shelter of the Supreme Lord." Those who are actually pure devotees are celebrated as Mahatmas, or great sages, personalities perfect in knowledge. They always think of the Supreme Lord and His lotus feet, and thus they automatically become liberated. Devotees who are always situated in that position become electrified by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, and thus they themselves become the source of liberation for their followers and devotees. A Krishna conscious person is fully electrified spiritually, and therefore anyone who touches or takes shelter of such a pure devotee becomes similarly electrified with spiritual potencies. Such devotees are never puffed up with material opulences. Generally, the material opulences are good parentage, education, beauty, and riches. But although a devotee of the Lord may possess all four of these material opulences, he is never carried away by the pride of possessing such distinctions. Great devotees of the Lord travel all over the world, from one place of pilgrimage to another, and on their way they meet many conditioned souls and deliver them by their association and distribution of transcendental knowledge. They generally reside in places like Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwaraka, Jagannath Puri, and Navadvip, because only devotees assemble in such places. In this way they give saintly association to one another and thus advance, so that every living entity can take advantage of the association of Krishna conscious persons. Such great devotees open temples and ashrams where Krishna's devotees assemble. By such association, people can develop more and more in Krishna consciousness. Such advancement is not possible in ordinary household life, which is devoid of Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continued, Dear Lord, there are two classes of transcendentalists, the impersonalists and the personalists. The opinion of the impersonalists is that this material manifestation is false, and that only the absolute truth is factual. The view of the personalists, however, is that the material world, although very temporary, is nevertheless not false, but factual. Such transcendentalists have different arguments to establish the validity of their philosophies. Factually, the material world is simultaneously both truth and untruth. It is truth because everything is an expansion of the supreme absolute truth. And it is untruth because the existence of the material world is temporary. It is created and it is annihilated. Because of its different conditions of existence, the cosmic manifestation has no fixed position. Those who advocate acceptance of this material world as false are generally known by the maxim Brahmasatyam Jagan Mithya. They put forward the argument that everything in the material world is prepared from matter. For example, there are many things made of clay, such as earthen pots, dishes, and bowls. After their annihilation, these things may be transformed into many other material objects, but in all cases, their existence as clay continues. An earthen water jug, after being broken, may be transformed into a bowl or dish, but either as a dish, bowl, or water jug, the earth itself continues to exist. Therefore, the forms of a water jug, bowl, or dish are false, but their existence as earth is real. This is the impersonalist's version. This cosmic manifestation is certainly produced from the absolute truth, but because its existence is temporary, it is false. The impersonalist's understanding is that the absolute truth, which is always present, is the only truth. In the opinion of other transcendentalists, however, this material world, being produced of the absolute truth, is also truth. The impersonalists argue that this is fallacious, because it is sometimes found that matter is produced from spirit soul, and sometimes that spirit soul is produced from matter. What? Such philosophers push forward the argument that although cow dung is dead matter, sometimes it is found that scorpions come out of cow dung. Similarly, dead matter like nails and hair comes out of the living body. Therefore, things produced of a certain thing are not always of the same quality as that thing. On the strength of this argument, Mayavadi philosophers tried to establish that although this cosmic manifestation is certainly an emanation from the absolute truth, the cosmic manifestation does not necessarily have truth in it. According to this view, the absolute truth, Brahman, should therefore be accepted as truth, whereas the cosmic manifestation, although a product of the absolute truth, cannot be taken as truth. The view of Mayavadi philosophers, however, is stated in the Bhagavad Gita to be the view of the asuras, or demons. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, asatyam apratishtam te jagat ahur anishwaram aparaspadasam bhutam kim anyat kama haitukam. The Asura's view of this cosmic manifestation is that the whole creation is false. The Asuras think that the mere interaction of matter is the source of the creation, and that there is no controller or God. But actually, this is not the fact. From the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that the 5 gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, and sky, plus the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, are the separated energies of the Supreme Lord. Beyond this inferior material energy is a spiritual energy known as the living entities. The living entities are accepted as the superior energy of the Lord. The whole cosmic manifestation is a combination of the inferior and superior energies, and the source of the energies is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has many different types of energies. This is confirmed in the Vedas. Parasya Shaktir Bibidaiva Shruyate. The transcendental energies of the Lord are variegated, and because such varieties of energies have emanated from the Supreme Lord, they cannot be false. The Lord is ever existing, and the energies are ever existing. Some of the energy is temporary, sometimes manifested and sometimes manifested, but this does not mean that it is false. The example may be given that when a person is angry, he does things which are different from his normal condition of life. But the fact that the mood of anger appears and disappears does not mean that the energy of anger is false. Therefore, the argument of the Mayavadi philosophers that this world is false is not accepted by the Vaishnava philosophers. The Lord himself confirms that the view that there is no supreme cause of this material manifestation, that there is no God, and that everything is only the creation of the interaction of matter, is a view of the Asuras. And it's after 8 o'clock, and we'll stop there. Hare Krishna. All glories to the personified Vedas. I was thinking while I was reading this time how the points that Prabhupada made while he was with us are all contained in this chapter. Again and again and again, actually. And it means that we, as conditioned souls, especially in this time, we need to hear this drilled into us, that we're not the material body, that we're eternal spiritual souls, that the material world is real, is temporary, but not false. Anyway, I'll stop there before I get carried away. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop here and beg the assembled Vaishnavas to give us their reflections and wisdom about how to apply these wonderful teachings. These are the building blocks of spiritual life. And if we ever get tired of hearing them, there's something wrong. Hare Krishna. Bhaji Vallabha just sent me a smile. You must have heard that. Okay, Radharaman, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, just in the same vein as you were just speaking, the earlier part of the reading, Prabhupada was making the point about devotees being devotee actually being surrendered to Krishna and the spiritual master, and those kind of things that only he says that others don't say, and then they speak so-called high topics to completely unsurrendered audiences, and then they don't actually get what they think they're getting. Only actually Prabhupada is telling the truth.
You know, I was on that vein. I was in Govardhan one time, and there was one of these big, gurus, and they were close by, and they were giving this lecture, and there were a lot of Westerners there, and he was talking really high stuff, actually Govardhan is actually female because, and on and on and on and on. And then he said something to the effect that, and don't let anybody tell you that you're not ready for these things. And just as he said that, this mad guy, a Westerner, he came running up, and jumped on the stage. And all of his followers started, tried to jump up and grabbed him and took him off the stage. And it was like, it was a, what do they call that? An aha moment, a eureka moment. When I understood, here's a typical example of someone preaching high philosophy to just anyone who happened to be there. And this was such a, what's the word? Clear example of how he was talking to people, over their heads completely. And that what they said is not going to help them at all in their spiritual life. Isn't it what you said? Same thing. Hare Krishna. Oh, I'm sorry. I got carried away.
First is from Gopakanya Devidasi.
Haribo Gopakanya Devidasi.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, all glories to your daily reading service and surrender to Srila Prabhupada's books.
So be it, may your words come true.
Jai Shri Krishna Katha and all hearers of the nectar.
Hare Krishna.
From Rati Manjari.
Haribo Rati.
She says, Jai Guru Maharaj, we want to become like you, fixed in transcendence.
Well, love is blind, as they say, as the saying goes.
And this is from Devadarana.
Haribo Devadarana.
Jai Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for your sweet nectar-like service.
I wish I could do it 24 hours, 24/7. I mean, doing the audiobooks is really nice because I get to hear. Now we're on, getting close to the end of the 5th chapter already of Adi Leela. And it's only been 4 days. I mean, and those chapters, 4th and 5th chapters are really long, really something. But still, there's a taste when you're reading the books with others and talking about it afterwards. It's wonderful. I wish I could do this 24/7. Maybe we can arrange it. Okay.
There's a comment from Bhakta Matsu.
Haribo Bhakta Matsu.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I feel like these daily readings are the life and soul, the very heartbeat of the movement.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. That's a profound observation. May it be so.
And from Bhakta Rupa.
Haribo Bhakta Rupa.
Thank you for reading, Maharaj.
The pleasure is all mine, believe me.
from Yaduttama.
Haribo Yaduttama.
Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Prabhupada.
Jai, all glories to His divine grace.
These books are power stations with which Śrīla Prabhupada is electrifying us all. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai ho.
There's another comment here from Bhaktirupa.
Haribo Bhaktirupa.
When we hear of these great devotees turning places into tirthas, I can't help but think of Hythe. A true place of pilgrimage for us little souls, thanks to your vibrating such pure sounds day in and day out.
Hare Krishna.
I hope I get to go on another pilgrimage there again someday.
Hare Krishna, me too. Me and Abai are just waiting for you guys to come back. Hare Krishna.
From Anandamurti Devi Dasi.
Haribol Anandamurti.
Dear Guru Maharaj and all devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupada.
Haribol.
Yes, I was also thinking that I should listen to this chapter again and again until my material desires might be diminished. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to hear these principles.
Well said, thank you. Yeah, and it's so long. Isn't it Krishna's arranged everything, Vyāsadeva? He put this chapter towards the end of the book, so you can just hear the basics again and again and again and again. I wonder at these characters who are mentioned in the 10th canto, but you never hear them talk about this. Right? And it's the longest chapter in the book. It's amazing.
From Daitari Haridas.
Yes, Daitaya Haridas.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupada. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness is so satisfying to the heart and intelligence. Prabhupada explains things in such a consistent, logical way that any reasonable person would accept.
Yeah, Prabhupada said that over and over again. Anybody who's honest, sincere, and reasonable will accept these thoughts.
Hearing our philosophy up against some of the mad, concocted theories of the Mayavadis and modern atheists strengthens my faith.
Yes.
And Yaduttamadas comments, maybe we could someday set up a 24-hour book kirtan like Ayendra Prabhu did in Vrindavan. Just an idea.
Sure. There are devotees in Vrindavan who do this, who just sit down in one place and just read the Bhagavatam, again and again, out loud. Thank all of you very much, and thank you, although I know you're not, maybe you're not, maybe you are, but consciously doing it, but today we did 4.5 hours of sound, which meant 5 hours of time, so 5 hours plus this hour, a little bit more than an hour, hour and a half, that's 6.5, plus 32 rounds, plus the morning program and our Bhagavad Gita in the morning. Do the math. Yeah, it's wonderful. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ki Jai. Śrīla Prabhupada, the most recent link in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, who was empowered enough to give the teachings all over the world. Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All right, see you tomorrow night. Same time, same place, same topic. The unfolding, ongoing instructions from the personified Vedas to us. See you tomorrow. Hari Bol.